policy, there is a dismissal policy. Further on, it talks about that the county administrator is the appeal process. I just want to make sure everybody understands what that is, because I've talked to other board members, and my major concern is there's going to be an issue, and each station's going to run to their respective board of supervisor and try to plead their case. And I know at some point it comes to us, but that's not what the policy says. And I want to make sure that everybody first agrees that this was their number one priority, and number two, what happens in the event something happens. Because as sure as we're all sitting here, somebody's not going to agree, there's going to be a situation, and all 5 board members are going to get phone calls from different organizations about a different aspect of the issue. I know we're all nodding our heads, yeah, today, we understand. I just want to reiterate that point. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Rozelle?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I've been through this from A to Z, and the CCEUO, which is the volunteer organization of the chiefs and the captains, and the presidents of these organizations. These are the ones who said, we need a chief, we need a leader. And that's why we're here tonight. That's why we're at this point. And that's why we've invested in what we invested in. So I think, you hear the plea from the volunteers that, we need a unified front. And that's exactly, why we're here at this point. But, I think there have been some models that's been close to us, and they've happened to be in Hanover and Spotsylvania. Those models started about 25 and 30 years ago. And those models have worked pretty good for about 25 or 30 years. And at some point we all knew the day would come that we would have to address this issue. And I think that working with the work groups that we've had, we've gotten to this point. And I just hear some of the comments that the active volunteers today are saying, this is what we need. And I hear you guys, because I knew you guys are the ones who are doing the work, and we want to do what's right. But the one issue about getting back with the commission, I'm not sure those meetings had to do with this tonight, as far as this public hearing. There's some other things that we need to do, continue to work with our commission, because we're going to use our commission. We hope to use them with the chief and the working through that mechanism. And we talked to the commission about that, and the board discussed that clearly with them. So as far as any other questions, the officers of each company, the state police checks, these are things today that are necessary. You have to do these kind of things. If you have a bad apple, and even if they're volunteer like I am, if I'm a bad apple, you need to throw me out. And we have to have our checks and balances. As much as I love my volunteers, if we have a bad apple, we have to have a mechanism to deal with that. And they are very far and few between. So, we're saying that. I mean, that's all I really have, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
No specific points at this time.
Okay. Certainly, let me say that I understand that the comments of Mr. Penny and certainly of Mr. Chenault, but we've heard the volunteers, the people that are on the front line tonight, indicate, yes, we need someone to direct. We need someone to organize us, and we need someone that's going to be a leader of the organizations. And I think we have to listen to those people that are saying that. Not that we don't take into consideration what Mr. Chenault and Mr. Penny has said. Certainly, Mr. Penny was very much involved in creating organization down in the Sparta area, and he's certainly appreciated. But again, I think we've come to a point in time in the life of Caroline County that we must get beyond the point where we were 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago. I am confident that we have a chief here in Caroline County. Yeah, we paid him good money, but you get what you pay for, and so I think we have one of the best chiefs anywhere around. And I would put up Chief Lehman against any chief in any neighboring county, and I think he'll come out on top of any of them. So I'm very proud to have him, and I think the volunteers are very proud to have him as their soon-to-be leader, I believe, from what some of the comments I've heard of this board. I think the volunteers understand. I heard Robert Mitchell say tonight, he serves because he wants to do what is best for Caroline County citizens, not to stroke his ego. And the people that are going to get upset about some of these issues are people that are wanting just to stroke their ego and really does not have the what is best for the citizens of Caroline County at heart. And so I have to listen to people like Ricky Madiak, which served for many years, and Lady Smith, and people like Robert Mitchell, which has served for many years, and Carl that serves in Bowling Green. You have to listen to those people as to what they have to say. So with that having been said, I agree with Mr. Roselle. I don't necessarily think that the board had ever indicated to the commission that we are saying that this ordinance will not be voted on prior and the chief becoming the lead person prior to the discussions, but that certain discussions would be between the county administrator, the chief, and the commission to work an agreement out as to what part the commission plays in the overall scheme of things. Wanting the commission, the board truly wants the commission to be a strong part of this process in Caroline County. So we urge you and encourage you as soon as possible to make it available so that your schedules will not conflict with staff, so that you can start those discussions and have those discussions. All right, having said that, does the board wish to move forward with this issue?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to get clarification on the open air burning thing before we go to a vote, if we could. Could we take a couple minutes so I can confer with staff?
Absolutely. Sure. Board will take a 5-minute recess.
Okay, well, before we do that, we'll come back. All right, that's fine.
We'll reconvene the Board of Supervisors meeting. All right. Mr. Emerson, would you make an explanation on and respond to Mr. Popowitz's question about Chapter 7.2?
Yes, sir.
Or Section 7.2.
Yes, sir. The proposed ordinance changes only 2 sections of the current open burning regulations, and neither of those sections deal with the exemptions. And the section that Mr. Popowitz was concerned about for agricultural burning, farm burning, was one of the exemptions in the original ordinance, and that would not be changed by the new ordinance. In fact, most of the open burning regulations will remain the same as they are now, even after adoption of the new ordinance as proposed.
Okay. How does the board wish?
I would still like to see us postpone, because we did promise the ESC that we would discuss this with them before we finalized this, and that was what we talked to them about in that meeting with them, and I think as a board we need to hold to what we said we would do before we move forward. We've done the public hearing like we said we would. We've done public hearings in the past and have then finished other discussions before we vote on it. I don't see any reason to not honor the promise that we made as a board.
Mr. Chairman? Okay.
Mr. Roselle?
Just follow up on my motion, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve ordinance to amend Chapter 7 of the Emergency Services Code.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roselle, seconded by Mr. Popowitz, that we approve an ordinance to amend Chapter 7, Emergency Services, and the various sections that we talked about earlier when we went into public hearing on. Is there discussion on that motion?
Discussion, Mr. Chair.
Mr.
Thomas, are we saying that in this ordinance there are no comments or nothing that affects the Emergency Services Commission?
I believe that there's something, Mr. Pardon, or Mr. You want to explain why that's at in the ordinance and what it says?
If you'll bear with me while I find it.
My recollection, while he's looking, my recollection of the discussion we had with the Emergency Services Commission, and again, that was discussed in closed session, so I'm not sure that it's appropriate to come out of closed session and discuss what we talked to them about in closed session. But I don't believe that we are, from my feelings, I don't believe that we are reneging on any promises, any commitments, anything that we said to the commission members as to what we wanted to see happen. And so I don't believe, Mr. Cecilia, that we are, this board is reneging on any, as you say, promises or commitments we made to the Emergency Services Commission, without going into detail what we discussed with the Emergency Services Commission in closed session. Mr. Pardon?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The section that relates to the Emergency Services Commission is under 15.5, and it simply says the board is authorized and may at its discretion establish a Caroline County Emergency Services Commission as an advisory body to the chief. Now, that is a change. Formerly, it was an advisory body to the board. By adoption of the ordinance, of a resolution, setting forth a charter of such commission, their terms of office, the duties and authority of the commission, and such other matters as the chief may determine and set forth therein. So, what it's doing is calling attention to the fact that the advisory body would now report to the chief, and that the charter could be developed and amended, and as is the case, since it already exists at this point.
I'm reading it as he looked at, and without discussing anything that we discussed in closed session. We did, however, say that there would be a meeting with the Emergency Services Commission and the county administrator. I would just like to have that meeting take place. You know, based on the comments here, I more than likely would vote for this change. I would just like to see that meeting take place before we did it.
Okay. And I'm confident that meeting will take place. The commission members will make their schedule available to the county administrator. I believe the board is saying to the county administrator, you need to open up your calendar. That's going to be agreeable to that county, whenever they can
Again,
meet.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not opposed to this ordinance, but I do believe that I think that meeting that we have talked about needs to take place before we vote on it, just to make sure the lines are straight.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion on the floor to approve an ordinance to amend Chapter 7 Emergency Services, vote by saying aye. All in favor of aye? Aye. All opposed, nay?
Nay.
I'm going to vote aye with a protest.
All right.
Is that possible?
4 ayes and 1 nay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Pardon. Moving on to unfinished business. Discussion of status of T21 grant for Bowling Green Pedestrian Park Project. Mr. Wilson.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As the board probably recalls, in 2006, the county applied for and secured a federal enhancement grant administered by VDOT for the creation of a park in Bowling Green near the courthouse complex. The grant is for $458,025, requiring a match of $114,506, of which $11,086 have been spent to further that project. As the project has been on hold since 2007, the Commonwealth Transportation Board has informed the county that should the project not move forward in the near term, the funding will be rescinded and future grant requests through the enhancement program will unlikely be funded. We suggest some points to consider, given this current state of affairs, are the county match was previously appropriated and funded through past borrowing measures, and the matching funds are currently available for this project. The driving impetus for the project was the funding of additional parking facilities in Bowling Green, and the project so far, as envisioned, accomplishes this. No specific design or project scope has been approved by the board. This is a totally flexible project. However you would like to see this project emerge, still within your ability to control. An architect has been hired before the project was put on hold, and the basic concept plan exists as a starting point to have discussions about how a park should look. One stakeholder meeting was held to determine the views of the town of Bowling Green and county departments regarding space usage. And though it originally appeared that funds from this project could not be applied to other projects originally when this memo was written, we have been told, however, that it appears that that may be a possibility. The process would be that you would need to contact our representative of the Commonwealth Transportation Board and secure her approval. And I also believe that we would have to determine a number of details about that process that we currently do not have. But we hope to get from VDOT very soon to be able to tell you if that indeed is a process that could work, let's say, with using it and applying it to Port Royal's Visitor Center, which is currently shy a few dollars of completion. The project does remain open to input and is fluid in the design process. There's no commitments in this process in any way. The board can control that. And I do have to say that in the event that the project is not advanced and the Commonwealth Transportation Board rescinds the grant, the loss of future grant opportunities would probably result in severely handicap our transportation-related funding through the enhancement program. In the past, we've received over $1 million through this program in grants, and it would be unlikely that they would want to continue to approve our grant applications if one was actually handed back to them unused. We would recommend that we pursue more details about the option of being able to apply this grant funding to other grant projects currently underway. This would probably not apply to any new applications we would make. Should it turn out that it is not available to be used, say in Port Royal, or in any other enhancement project, we do think that if we want to secure this as a funding source for the future, we should try to find some use for it as we currently have determined in this grant application, and take the form that the board would feel that would be most useful to the county and the town of Bowling Green.
I believe it was Mr. Rozelle and myself and Ms. Popowitz. I'm not sure that you heard what Mrs. Carter had to say, but the Commonwealth Transportation Board member that represents Caroline County indicated to us recently that it was her understanding, and according to the highway administrator, which the district or regional highway administrator, that it only could be applied toward sidewalks, roadways, things of that nature, that had already had an application out there existing. If we had some other projects out there that included those things, bike trails or things such as that, open, then we probably could request the money to be transferred over to these projects and would be successful at doing that. She indicated to us the urgency in the process. In fact, I believe she and the administrator both used, if you don't let us know in a couple of months, the money will be given to someone else. So we don't have time to sit around and and hope that something is going to take place. We're either going to move ahead with the project at hand, or we're going to risk losing the funding and risk losing additional or further funding that may be coming down the pike for us. That is the concern that I have. Now, how quickly do you feel that you can determine, or at least find some determination as to whether this money can be transferred to Port Royal project, and how much would that be? Are you looking at the entire $458,000 that would be needed in that project? Are you looking at $50,000? I think all those things are going to come into play here. The board, it was my understanding when this process first started, and I understand that I don't believe you were on the board when we started this process, but the board member that represented Bowling Green, and I'm assuming he was operating under certainly some requests from the town of Bowling Green and the blessing and the urging of the town of Bowling Green to support this particular project. I don't believe, knowing Mr. Farmer the way I do, that he would have supported a project that no one else supported but he. I don't think that was his makeup, and that was what he would do. So I'm just, to be honest with you, wondering why all of a sudden this has become a bad project and one that
Mr. Chairman, could I add something to that? And Mr. Popwood's kind of mentioned it to me. The project, as it was before, never actually had my full support for several different reasons. But suppose we were to take this particular grant money, it's like a giant bug fly. Suppose we were to take this particular grant money and apply it to the facade of the Commissioner of Revenue's office, which is a walkway, and connect that to the old jail, which is a walkway, we would actually be beautifying the front part of the courtyard as opposed to the back, which doesn't necessarily see as much traffic. And I think that and all the road closures was a problem for me before. Is that a possibility?
I don't believe we have determined the scope of the usage of this grant. I think it has a lot of latitude in how you apply it. If that would be a part of the park improvement, that's something we could run by VDOT and perhaps be able to apply that.
Because if we do something like that, Mr. Penny's still here, and I don't see Mr. Chenault, but the issue we've had with this particular project a couple of times is that whereas it's the county's intent to have a healthy, vibrant Bowling Green by us creating a park and parking spaces behind Main Street in Bowling Green really doesn't do anything to effectively make a better Bowling Green. So maybe if we put some of that in the front where people going through Main Street would see, it could lead to a second phase of doing something like this. But, that's just my opinion.
I certainly do not oppose something such as that, but from what Mrs. Carter indicated to us the day we spoke to her, it was limited, much more limited than what you are saying tonight, Mr. Wilson. She was saying that it was very limited, it was very narrowly given as to parameters that you could use this funding for. From what I'm getting from you tonight, you can use it for almost anything you want.
No, sir, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all, if I may.
But she has very, very plainly said that is not the case,
No.
as well as Quentin, and I don't recall Quentin's last name.
Mr. Elliott.
What?
Mr. Elliott.
Elliott. Yeah, Quentin Elliott. He indicated basically the same thing. But I'm not opposed to that. And I think one of the things that probably helped us get that grant, ICE-T grant, was it also helped the flow of traffic from one side of the street to the other side of the street. You were talking about safety when you were closing off that section of the street there, people coming from the court section over to the general district and circuit court, it was a free flow because there was no traffic there. So I think safety was a major issue. But I certainly am willing to research the issue.
Well, and the other thing was part of that discussion, I do remember that, the county administrator's office was over there. And we were sending people from there to the Commissioner of Revenue, back and forth. We've since, eliminated that problem, so it may not be as much of an issue. And I'd sure see it, I think it would be a better use to put it in front of, Main Street as opposed to behind it.
If I may, if I remember the ICE regulations well enough, any type of historical destination, walkway, that kind of thing, is actually part of that, and I think that we have a pretty good case for changing the scope at least enough to where we could fix that facade, which does need it to begin with, and also include it as a walking path and walking facility. I don't know if that, we're going to have to spend money to fix that at some point anyway, because it may become a hazard, because we know that there's some ground issues there. So this may be an opportunity to fix that facility.
Mr. Roselle?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I think one thing we certainly need to do is, talk to the stakeholders, the people who were the original stakeholders, and see if the need is the same need. What I remember was there were additional 20 parking spaces that we would get. It would cost us $100,000 to do the additional parking spaces anyway, but we have a whole lot more than just 20 parking spaces. But if has the need changed? I mean, the town of Bowling Green signed off that yes, we support this project some time back. Do they still feel the same way? And if they still feel strong about it, are they willing to put up 10% of the cost? I don't know. I think these are the kind of questions I think we still need to ask. Now, I think anybody in the state government should understand, times are getting a little better in some areas and not as well in some, but in the state, they should understand with the hard times that we've been through, that can extend this. Is there any way to extend it? Mayor Lee Carter, and we're so grateful to her for assisting us in obtaining these T grants. But at the same time, we don't want to lose her trust. When we go to her asking for these grants, and so I think we need to go back and look at all these areas to see if the need is still there, and then if it's not, then what is the drop dead date on this timeline? How long do we actually have? What is the drop dead date? So I think we still need a few more questions answered. We've already spent in engineering costs $8,000 or so, something like that.
$11,000.
$11,000. So we've already headed down the path because some time ago the people said this was a good idea. So if it's changed, we need to look at it. Let the stakeholders reevaluate this thing and make sure we do what's right. That's all I
Okay.
ask.
Other comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Seeley?
I have a few comments.
Sure.
And first of all, most of the folks that have approached me about this or that I've talked about this don't understand why we'd spend $114,000 at this point in time, because we heard the other night that the state budget isn't finished. We don't know what's going to happen. And even tonight you said, revenues are not good in the state, they're not good here.
Right.
So spending $114,000 on a park right now doesn't seem to resonate very well at all. Secondly, let's talk a little bit about the drawing that was given to us, because I was at the town council when this was discussed. The drawing that we have isn't even to scale. We couldn't tell none of the proportions were correct. It looked like this park was enormous, and in actuality, it's not very big at all. There are still some utility issues underneath there. There are a lot of issues that have not even been discussed. But I think first and foremost, in the economy that we're in, if somebody held it at the state level against us for not being able to